Frozen in the aisle, billionaire, paralyzed, seeing his ex-wife, returning baby formula, because she couldn't afford it. Before we dive into the details, drop a comment below and tell us what city you're watching from. And once this emotional roller coaster is over, don't forget to rate it from 0 to 10. Oh, and make sure you subscribe to our channel for more intense, heartwarming stories, just like this one. Now, sit back and absorb every detail. Part 1. The Empire and the Echo. The glass elevator ascended silently through the towering downtown Manhattan skyline, carrying Caspian Vance toward another day of calculated decisions and corporate victories. At 32, Caspian commanded a tech empire valued in the billions, his AI-driven educational software reshaping classrooms across 3 continents. His reflection in the polished steel doors showed a man carved by ambition, sharp jawline, cold steel-gray eyes, and dark hair perfectly styled, despite the early hour. Caspian adjusted his Italian silk tie, a ritual that centered him before board meetings. Numbers didn't lie, spreadsheets had no moods, and quarterly reports required no emotional intelligence, only relentless focus and an unwavering commitment to excellence. The elevator chimed softly, arriving at the 52nd floor of Vance Innovations. His executive assistant, Dominique, met him with a steaming cup of black coffee and a tablet displaying his schedule. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. The pitch for the Dubai expansion is finalized, and the Asian partners confirmed your video conference for 3 p.m. "Thank you, Dominique." His voice held the commanding tone that had closed multi-million-dollar deals. Today, however, something felt off. A subtle tension coiled between his shoulder blades. Stress, most likely. He'd been pulling 18-hour days for the last 6 weeks. He settled behind his mahogany desk, surrounded by awards and framed photos of company milestones. Caspian's gaze drifted to an empty space where another photo had once sat. 10 months ago, an image had been there. Him and Serafina at a charity gala, her warm, earnest smile contrasting with his composed expression. She had worn a simple emerald gown that night, unlike the designer frocks other women favored. That simplicity was what initially drew him to her. Serafina Maeve, 29, a PhD candidate in art history at New York University, believed that beauty and history could change lives. Where he saw problems requiring systematic solutions, she saw human beings needing compassion. Their 2 years together had been a study in contrasts. His minimalist penthouse filled with her dog-eared art books, his silent dinners interrupted by her animated discussions about her students. "I don't need grand gestures, Caspian," she had once told him, curled up on his pristine white sofa with a cup of chamomile tea. "I just need you here, truly here." But here had always been negotiable for him. Dubai called. Shanghai demanded his attention. Board meetings spilled into weekends, and business dinners replaced quiet nights at home. He had built an empire by never saying no to an opportunity, never choosing comfort over growth. The memory dissolved when his phone buzzed with a text from his doctor's office, reminding him of a missed appointment. Caspian rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar throb of a tension headache building behind his eyes. When was the last time he took a real break? When was the last time he slept more than 5 hours? Don't forget to hit the like button if you've ever had to choose between your career and your personal life. It's a painful choice. Part 2. The unexpected detour by 3 p.m. after back-to-back meetings and a lunch consisting of protein bars consumed at his desk. The headache had evolved into a persistent pounding. Not even his usual stoicism could mask the discomfort as he led the video conference with the Asian partners. "Mr. Vance, are you feeling unwell?" asked Mr. Chen, his lead investor from Singapore. His worried face pixelated on the screen. "Just a headache. Nothing a quick fix won't handle. But even as he said it, Caspian realized the pain was clouding his focus. The numbers looked slightly blurry on his monitor, and he found himself squinting at the quarterly projections. After the call ended, Dominique knocked on his door. "Sir, there's a pharmacy only 4 blocks away if you'd like me to." "No, I'll go myself." The decision surprised even him. Caspian Vance did not run personal errands. He had assistants for mundane tasks, drivers for transport, and a team of people whose job was to ensure he never had to set foot in commonplace locations like drugstores. But something about the afternoon felt different. Perhaps it was the throbbing headache, or maybe it was the way the empty space on his desk seemed to mock him every time he looked up from his work. Whatever the reason, 20 minutes later, he found himself walking through the automatic doors of the neighborhood apothecary. The fluorescent lighting felt harsh after the soft ambiance of his executive floor. Shoppers bustled through narrow aisles packed with everything from greeting cards to baby formula, their conversations creating a hum of ordinary life that felt alien to him. When was the last time he was in a place like this? When was the last time he was somewhere not designed for business or luxury? He quickly located the pain relief section, selecting the strongest option available. As he headed toward the checkout, passing displays of everyday necessities he'd forgotten existed, Caspian caught a glimpse of the pharmacy counter, where a young mother struggled to balance her restless baby while talking to the pharmacist. Something about her stance, the slight slump of defeated shoulders, the way she shifted the baby from one hip to the other, made him pause. And then she turned slightly, and his world tilted on its axis. Serafina! She looked different, thinner, with dark circles under her formerly bright hazel eyes. Her rich brown hair, which used to fall in soft waves past her shoulders, was pulled into a messy bun, but it was unmistakably her. The woman who used to read poetry aloud while he worked late, who made homemade soup when he was stressed, who begged him to choose them over his endless pursuit of more. And in her arms was a baby who couldn't be more than a few months old, with sparse dark hair and tiny fists that waved as he whimpered softly. The baby's face was red with distress, and Serafina gently rocked him, making soothing noises that Caspian recognized from countless nights when she had comforted him through his own stress-induced insomnia. Caspian's expensive Italian leather shoes felt glued to the pharmacy floor, his breath caught in his throat as the reality crashed over him like a cold wave. 10 months. The baby looked months old, the timeline matched with devastating precision. He watched, frozen, as Serafina approached the checkout counter with a small basket holding diapers, baby formula, and what looked like a prescription medication. Part 3. Humiliation and devastation. The elderly cashier, whose name tag read Doris, smiled warmly as she began scanning the items. "That'll be $47.50, dear," Doris said kindly. Serafina's face slightly fell as she rummaged through her purse. Caspian could see her counting bills, her lips moving silently as she calculated. The baby continued to fuss, and she automatically rocked him as she looked at the items on the counter. "I'm sorry," Serafina said quietly, her voice holding a note of embarrassment that squeezed Caspian's chest. "Could you just ring up the diapers? I'll come back for the formula another time." The word struck him like a physical blow. The woman who had once shared his bed, who had made his sterile penthouse feel like home, was 20 feet away, unable to afford baby formula. Doris's expression softened with understanding. "Of course, honey. That brings it down to $19. Serafina nodded gratefully, but Caspian could see the worry etched into every line of her face as she looked at the container of formula being set aside. The baby's cries intensified, as if sensing his mother's distress. That's when she saw him. Their eyes met across the small pharmacy, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Serafina's face went pale, her grip tightening protectively around the baby. Caspian saw a flash of emotions cross her features: surprise, pain, and something that might have been fear. Neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. The busy sounds of the pharmacy faded to background noise as 10 months of separation collapsed into one devastating moment of recognition. The baby in her arms was beautiful, and he looked exactly like Caspian as a baby, according to photos his mother had shown Serafina during their brief relationship. Interactive. Question: would you have walked away? Or would you have found the courage to cross that pharmacy floor and face the consequences of everything you thought you knew about love? Share your tough choice in the comments. The silence stretched between them like an abyss, filled only with the baby's soft wail and the distant hum of pharmacy conversations. Caspian's expensive leather legs felt unsteady as he took a tentative step forward, his usual confidence shattered by the scene before him. Serafina remained frozen at the checkout counter, her knuckles white as she hugged the baby closer to her chest. The baby had quieted slightly now, alert and watching. There was something painfully familiar about the shape of his small mouth, the way his brows furrowed in concentration. "He's beautiful," Caspian said softly. Serafina's grip tightened protectively. "His name is Theodore." It had been on the list of names they had once discussed during a rare quiet night, when she'd jokingly asked him what he'd name his children, if they ever had any. He'd been distracted by emails then, giving half answers, while she dreamed aloud of their future, a future he'd been too afraid to fully embrace. "How old is he?" The question came out harsher than he intended. 4 months. She paused, then added with deliberate precision. "He was born on March 15th. Caspian's mind raced, calculating. March. That meant November. Their last night together had been in November, just days before their final argument about his planned expansion into Asia, a project that would require him to travel for months. She had pleaded with him to postpone it, to stay for the holidays they'd never properly celebrated together. He had chosen the contract instead. "Serafina, Excuse me," Doris interrupted softly, "but there are other customers waiting." The spell broke. Caspian looked around, suddenly aware of the line forming behind them. An older man with a prescription bag was impatiently tapping his foot, while a hurried mother with 2 small children repeatedly checked her phone. Without hesitation, Caspian stepped forward and slapped his black Amex card onto the counter. "Add the formula and the medication." Thing in her basket. "Sir, you don't need to—" Doris started. "And ring up my items, too." He dropped the painkillers he had originally come for, though his headache seemed insignificant now compared to the ache in his chest. Serafina's face flushed with a mixture of shame and anger. "Caspian, no, I don't need your charity." "It's not charity." He locked eyes with her. "It's the least I can do." "The least you can do?" Her voice rose slightly, causing Theo to stir restlessly. She immediately lowered her tone, but the anger remained. "You think money fixes everything, don't you? You think you can just slide a card and make 10 months of silence disappear?" Doris efficiently rang up the items, her expression carefully neutral, despite the obvious tension between her customers. "That'll be $63.47. Caspian handed over his card, without taking his eyes off Serafina. "I think about you. Every day." "No." The single word carried the weight of months of pain. "Don't do that. Don't stand here and pretend you care when you made it very clear that I, weren't worth fighting for." Theo began fussing again in response to his mother's distress. Serafina automatically started the rocking motion that seemed to soothe him, her motherly instincts overriding their confrontation. "Here you go, honey." Doris handed the bag to Serafina with a knowing smile. "That baby formula should help him sleep better tonight." "Thank you," Serafina mumbled, accepting the bag while carefully holding Theo's weight. As they moved away from the counter, Caspian fell into step beside her, unsure of what he was doing, but unable to let her walk away again. The automatic doors slid open, releasing them into the cool New York afternoon. Gray clouds hung low over the city, threatening rain. "Where is your car parked?" he asked. "I took the bus." She shifted Theo to her other arm, the bag of baby supplies heavy on her shoulder. The revelation hit him like a physical blow. Serafina, who used to drive the reliable old Toyota he'd mocked, was taking public transit with a 4-month-old baby in unpredictable New York weather, carrying formula she couldn't afford. "Let me drive you home." "No." She started walking toward the bus stop, her pace determined despite the obvious exhaustion in her movements. Caspian followed, his Italian leather shoes echoing against the wet pavement. "Serafina, please, just let me." She stopped abruptly and turned to face him, her eyes blazing with the first real emotion he'd seen from her. "Let you what? Fix this with your money? Make yourself feel better for abandoning us?" "I didn't know." "You didn't know because you didn't want to know." Her voice cracked with the weight of months of pent-up pain. "I tried to tell you I was pregnant, Caspian. I tried for weeks, but you were always rushing off to another meeting, another trip, another deal that was more important than 5 minutes of conversation with the woman you claimed to love." The words struck him with devastating accuracy. He remembered now. The phone calls he'd cut short, the conversations he'd postponed, the way she'd looked at him with something important to say before he rushed out the door. Theo's cries intensified in response to his mother's anguish. Serafina immediately focused on calming him, making gentle soothing sounds as the tears she refused to shed made her eyes glisten. "I'm sorry," Caspian said quietly. "God, Serafina, I am so sorry." She looked at him then, truly looked at him, as if seeing him for the first time in months. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of impending rain and the faint scent of coffee from a nearby cafe. A smell that reminded them both of countless mornings they had once shared. For a moment, her expression softened. For a moment, she was the woman who used to trace patterns on his chest while he slept, who believed in happy endings and second chances. Then, Theo's cries ramped up, and the moment shattered. "I have to go," she said, adjusting the baby and hurrying toward the approaching bus. "He needs to eat, and my mother is waiting for her medication." Caspian watched helplessly as she climbed the bus steps, struggling with Theo and the heavy bag. She found a seat near the window, and for a brief instant their eyes met through the glass. He saw exhaustion there, and pain, but also something that might have been longing before she turned away. The bus pulled into traffic, carrying away the woman he had lost, and the child he never knew existed. Caspian stood on the sidewalk as the first drops of rain began to fall, wondering if some mistakes were simply too huge to ever be forgiven. Part 4. The rain and the new strategy. The rain intensified as Caspian stood motionless on the sidewalk, watching the bus disappear into the New York afternoon traffic. The water soaked his expensive suit jacket, but he barely noticed. His mind replayed every second of the encounter, dissecting every word, every look, every devastating revelation. Theo, his son, had a name, a face, a life that had been going on without him for 4 months. A passing pedestrian bumped his shoulder, jarring him back to reality. Caspian looked around, disoriented, as if waking from a dream. The familiar Manhattan streetscape suddenly felt alien. His phone buzzed insistently. Missed calls from Dominique, wondering where he had disappeared to. He walked slowly back to his black Maybach. The luxury vehicle now felt obscene, its immaculate interior sharply contrasting with the memory of Serafina counting crumpled bills, unable to afford baby formula. Sitting behind the wheel, Caspian's hands trembled slightly as he gripped the steering wheel. He was a man who had negotiated billion-dollar mergers without breaking a sweat. But 5 minutes with Serafina had torn down the walls he'd carefully constructed around his emotions. His phone rang again. "Cancel everything." The words came out hoarse, barely recognizable as his own voice. "Mr. Vance, did you say cancel?" "Everything. Everything for today. The Singapore contract can wait until tomorrow." In 3 years, Dominique had never heard Caspian Vance cancel a business obligation. "I'm fine. Just handle it." He ended the call and tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. Fine. The word tasted like ash in his mouth. None of this was fine. Instead of driving back to his office tower, Caspian found himself navigating into neighborhoods he rarely visited. Middle-class areas with modest homes, tree-lined streets where children rode bicycles. He pulled into a family-run cafe with mismatched furniture and that kind of worn-in comfort that reminded him of simpler times. "What can I get for you?" the barista asked. "Black coffee." "No, actually a cappuccino, extra foam." Serafina's favorite. He chose a corner booth and gazed out the rain-streaked window, watching ordinary people live their lives. The simple sight of a father pushing a stroller hit him. 4 months. Theo had been alive for 4 months, and Caspian had missed everything. First smiles, first coups, countless nighttime feedings. The weight of his absence felt crushing. "You look like a man carrying the weight of the world." Caspian met the eye of an older gentleman at the next table. "Something like that," he replied, surprised by his own willingness to talk to a stranger. "The greatest regret of my life," the man continued, "was choosing pride over love. I let my wife walk away 40 years ago because I was too stubborn to admit I was wrong. Success tastes pretty empty when you ain't got nobody to share it with. What if it's too late? What if the damage is too bad?" "Son, it's only too late when one of you is in the grave," the old man replied. "As long as you're both breathing, there's hope. But hope requires action, not just wishing." The elderly man stood up. "Don't wait 40 years to find out if love is stronger than pride." Part 5. The Recovery Plan. Operation Dignity. Caspian stared at his cappuccino. The memory of the last serious conversation with Serafina returned to him. "I need you here, truly here." He had answered with the planning for his Asia expansion. Now, sitting in that humble cafe, Caspian finally understood what he had lost. Not just a woman who loved him, but a chance at the life he'd been too afraid to want. The next day, Caspian arrived at his office at 5:47 a.m. He hadn't slept. His immaculate appearance was rumpled, his tie loosened. "Delegate to Marcus," he told his assistant, "and cancel my meetings today." Dominique looked at him as if he were speaking a foreign language. Caspian spent the day making a series of calls. Not to business partners, but to people he rarely contacted directly. Property managers he owned, university scholarship coordinators, private investigators specializing in sensitive family matters. By 10 a.m., he had a plan that utilized his wealth, but was designed to preserve Serafina's dignity and independence. Eleanor's bills. Serafina's mother, Eleanor's medical bills, were substantial. Caspian set up an anonymous payment system through a medical charity foundation he'd established years ago for tax benefits. The bills would be discreetly paid without any way to track them back to him. The university grant. The NYU Scholarship Office accepted a significant donation with a request to fast-track aid for deserving single mothers pursuing advanced studies in art history. The Sinclair grant was specifically created for this purpose. The Safe Apartment. The property management company handling his residential investments found a small, 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood near the university. The rent would be surprisingly affordable thanks to a new educator assistance program. Every arrangement was carefully structured to appear coincidental, channeled through legitimate organizations that could not be traced back to him. Caspian had spent years learning how to move money invisibly for business purposes. Now he was applying those skills to a different kind of investment. The investment in his family's future. Part 6. The Clash of Gratitude and Suspicion. While Caspian orchestrated his plan, Serafina was at home dealing with life. Theo had been fussy through the night. She had an essay due for her Victorian literature seminar and a pile of freshman papers to grade. She received a text from her mother's landlord. Another rent increase. How had her barely surviving balance become so precarious? The irony that the man who had once filled her life with financial security was now absent while she struggled to pay for the basics was not lost on her. A soft knock on the front door interrupted her thoughts. A delivery person was on the porch, holding a large, cellophane-wrapped hamper. It was filled with organic baby food, premium diapers, and several containers of the expensive formula Theo needed. A simple card read, "From the Collegiate Women's Support Network. Congratulations on your academic achievements." Serafina stared at the hamper in confusion. The formula alone represented a week of careful budgeting. Her phone rang. The financial aid office at NYU. "Ms. Maeve, I have wonderful news. The Sinclair Grant for Single Mothers has approved your application. The award covers your full tuition for the rest of your master's program. I'm sorry, but I never applied for the Sinclair Grant. According to our records, your application was filed last month by your academic advisor. The selection committee was particularly impressed by your essay on balancing motherhood and academic pursuits." Serafina felt a chill of suspicion. A mysterious grant that perfectly fit her situation, appearing right as her financial pressures hit breaking point. Gifts delivered from an organization she'd never heard of. The timing felt too convenient, too perfectly orchestrated. But as she looked at her mother's cramped apartment and Theo sleeping peacefully, she found herself caught between suspicion and desperate gratitude. That evening, her phone rang one more time. A property management company with an unexpected offer. A 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood, immediately available, with a rent she could afford through a new educator program. The apartments were in a historic building near the university, with built-in bookshelves that seemed designed for someone surrounded by literature. The rent was nearly half what she'd expected to pay for a lesser quality place. "Someone is orchestrating these coincidences," whispered the academic in her. She thought briefly of Caspian, remembering his offer of help at the pharmacy. But these opportunities felt different, respectful of her independence, offering a leg up rather than a handout. Whoever was behind this understood she needed assistance, not rescue. Still, as she settled into bed at her mother's apartment, she couldn't silence the voice in her head that whispered a familiar name. A name connected to resources, to influence, to the kind of reach that could orchestrate such perfectly timed interventions. Interactive question. Do you think Caspian's plan to help anonymously is ethical? Or is it still a way to subtly control Serafina's life without her consent? Share your moral dilemma in the comments. Part 7. The Visit of Truth. The Weapon of Humility. 3 weeks later, settled into her new apartment, Serafina was grading papers when there was a knock at the door. A woman in her late 50s with silver hair and kind but nervous eyes introduced herself. "Ms. Maeve, I'm Patricia Carlson from the Sinclair Grant Foundation." Serafina's stomach clenched. The inevitable moment when they would realize a mistake. "I've been wondering about that," Serafina said. "I never applied for the Sinclair Grant." Patricia's smile was gentle, but tinged with guilt. "That's because it didn't exist before 6 weeks ago. The Sinclair Grant was created specifically for you, Ms. Maeve, as was the Collegiate Women's Support Network and the Educator Assistance Program." Serafina felt her chest constrict with a mixture of panic and rage. "Who?" Patricia opened a leather portfolio. "I run a legitimate nonprofit. 3 weeks ago, I received a donation larger than my organization's entire annual budget, with very specific instructions on how to assist one particular young mother." "Caspian." The name came out barely a whisper. "Mr. Vance was quite insistent that all assistance should appear to come from established organizations. He wanted to ensure your dignity remained intact and that you could never be accused of accepting charity. Patricia's voice was gentle but firm. So none of this was real, Serafina said. The help is real, Patricia interjected softly. The source may be different than you believed, but the assistance is genuine. Your mother's medical bills are paid through a legitimate foundation Mr. Vance has supported for years. The rent on this apartment has been paid in full for 2 years, and the scholarship money has been placed in an irrevocable trust. Not even he can take it back. Serafina turned to her, feeling a mix of horror and gratitude. Why are you telling me this? Because he asked me to. He said if you ever questioned the coincidences, and he was sure you would because you're too intelligent, I should tell you the truth. Patricia handed her a sealed envelope. He also asked me to give you this. He said you'd likely say you didn't want it. Serafina looked at the envelope. I don't want it. Patricia placed it on the coffee table between them. He also told me to tell you that this is not about getting you back. It's about ensuring his son has what he needs, and that the woman he loves doesn't have to choose between her dreams and her child's well-being. The words struck Serafina like a physical blow. His son. The woman he loves. After months of silence, Caspian was staking a claim. He has no right. He's all too right, Patricia said. He has no legal rights, no moral authority, no claim to your boy. But he has resources, and he chose to use them to help rather than control. In my 20 years in assistance programs, I have never seen someone work so hard to help while staying completely out of the picture. After Patricia left, Serafina sat in her lovely apartment staring at the envelope. The thought should have enraged her, and a part of her did. But another part, a part she didn't want to acknowledge, was moved by the careful way he'd done it. No grand gestures, no public pronouncements, no demands for gratitude or access. He had given her exactly what she needed without asking for anything in return. He had been listening all along. He just hadn't known how to respond until it was too late. She read Caspian's letter, his words precise and full of regret. I was a coward, Serafina, and my cowardice cost us everything. I know Theo isn't mine in the legal sense. I forfeited that right when I chose contracts over conversation. But he is yours, and you are the most important person who has ever been in my life. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a second chance. I only ask that you let me do this one thing right. Serafina realized she had a choice. She could send it all back, preserve her pride, and struggle alone. Or she could accept that sometimes love looked like taking a step back rather than a step forward, providing rather than owning. For the first time in 10 months, she wasn't sure which option would require more courage. Interactive. Question: do you think Serafina should hold on to her pride and refuse the help, or accept the resources for the sake of Theo and her mother's health? Comment your decision. Part wait. The hospital and the medical truth. The mention of her mother made Serafina's resolve waver. Eleanor had another chemotherapy session scheduled for tomorrow, and any disruption to her treatment could be dangerous. What do you want? Serafina asked, her voice tinged with fear. There's something about your mother's medical care that requires immediate attention, Caspian said. Panic forced her to set aside pride. The coffee shop on Pine Street, Grind Coffee. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I'll be there. The next afternoon, Serafina arrived early with Theo in his stroller, choosing a corner table. Caspian walked in at exactly 2 o'clock. He looked different, still impeccably dressed, but somehow less armored. He's grown, he said quietly, referring to Theo. Babies do that. Serafina's tone was neutral. You said there was something about my mother's medical care. Yes. Caspian pulled out a folder. Patricia was coordinating directly with your mother's oncology team. Without her, there's a communication gap that could affect treatment scheduling and insurance processing. He opened the folder. And there's been a complication with her treatment plan. Serafina's heart froze. What kind of complication? The experimental therapy her doctor recommended. The one that's shown the most promise for her specific type of cancer. It's not covered by her insurance. The cost is... Caspian named a figure that made Serafina's vision swim. How long has she been without it? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, and I wouldn't dare interpret her information. But Patricia thought it was urgent. Serafina stared at the papers, feeling the weight of impossible choices. The experimental treatment could save her mother's life, but the cost would bankrupt them, even with all of Caspian's anonymous help. Without it, Eleanor might have months instead of years. There's something else, Caspian said softly. I want to propose something, and I need you to hear me out before you say no. I want to pay for your mother's treatment, all of it, but not as charity, and not as manipulation. He leaned in slightly. But as Theo's father. You forfeited the right to call yourself his father, Serafina said quietly. I know, and I know I can't buy my way back into that role, but biology doesn't change, Serafina. He is my son, even if I don't deserve that title. And you are my son's mother, even if I failed you both. Caspian continued, his voice growing stronger. Allow me to take care of Eleanor's medical expenses, not as your ex-boyfriend, but as someone who wants to ensure Theo's grandmother is healthy enough to watch him grow up. Theo chose that moment to reach out from his stroller, grasping at the air between his parents. Caspian and Serafina noticed the gesture, and for an instant, the painful history between them receded. I need to think, Serafina said. Of course, but Serafina, Caspian's voice was soft, vulnerable. Don't let your anger with me keep your mother from the care she needs. Part 9. The Crisis and the Pact. At that moment, Serafina's phone rang. It was Eleanor's number. Mom. Honey, I'm at the hospital. I collapsed at home. They say things have progressed faster than expected. Dr. Chen wants to start the experimental treatment immediately, if we can get it sorted. Serafina's hand trembled. I'm on my way. Which hospital? NYU Langone. Serafina ended the call and found Caspian already standing, car keys in hand. Let me drive you, he said simply. For once, Serafina didn't argue. Some moments were bigger than pride, bigger than pain. This was about Eleanor's life, about Theo's grandmother, about a family that had fractured, but could still find a way to heal. The fluorescent lights of the NYU Langone Medical Center cast everything in a harsh, sterile relief. Caspian and Serafina rushed through the corridors. Eleanor looked smaller in the bed, her skin pale, but her eyes lit up at the sight of Theo. What did Dr. Chen say? The cancer has progressed to stage 4. Without aggressive treatment, the prognosis is 3 to 6 months, Dr. Chen said. With the experimental therapy, we could extend that significantly. And the cost? Caspian stepped forward. If cost is no concern, Dr. Chen, what would be the best possible treatment plan? I would recommend starting the experimental therapy immediately. The facility in Boston has the most advanced program, and we could transfer her there within 48 hours. Boston? Serafina's voice was small. That's 3 hours away. The treatment requires an initial 6-week stay, followed by bi-weekly outpatient visits. I would have to temporarily relocate. I can't, Serafina said, her voice slightly breaking. I can't afford to stop working, and I can't take Theo away from the stability we finally found. What if you didn't have to choose? Caspian said quietly. 3 pairs of eyes turned to him. He took a breath, knowing what he was about to propose would change everything. I own a condo in Boston. It's been empty for 2 years. You could stay there, all of you. I can arrange private nursing care for your mother, tutoring for your graduate studies, and childcare for Theo when you need it. Caspian, I'm not asking for anything in return, he cut in quickly. I'm not asking to move in or play family. I'm offering a place for you to stay while your mother gets treatment. That's it. Eleanor watched this exchange with keen eyes. And what do you get out of this arrangement? The knowledge that Theo's grandmother has the best possible chance of survival. The knowledge that Serafina doesn't have to choose between her mother's life and her own stability. Caspian softened. And perhaps, if I'm very lucky, the chance to be present for my son, in a way I wasn't before. Mom, what do you want to do? Eleanor's smile was tired but determined. I want to fight. I want to see this boy take his first steps. I want to read him stories. She looked directly at Caspian. And if that means accepting help from someone who hurt my daughter, I will swallow my pride for a chance to be his grandmother a little longer. Then we go to Boston, Serafina said, her voice steady despite the tears. Dr. Chen stood up to make arrangements. Serafina and Caspian were left alone with Theo, facing the reality of what they had just agreed to. Are you sure about this? Serafina asked quietly. I'm terrified, she admitted. Of accepting so much help from you, of what it might mean, of hoping my mother will be okay. Caspian reached out, not quite touching her, but close enough that she could feel his presence. I'm terrified too, of disappointing you again, of proving I haven't really changed, of watching you walk away a second time when this is over. Theo stirred in his sleep, and they both instinctively looked down at him. Their son, the bridge between their past and whatever future they might build. For them, Serafina said softly. We'll do this for them. For them. Caspian nodded. But they both knew that somewhere between the fear and the hope, they were also doing it for themselves, for a chance to find out if love could be stronger than the mistakes that had shattered them. Conclusion and call to action. Reflection. Serafina's decision to go to Boston for Eleanor's sake is not the end, but the real beginning of Caspian's redemption. He has accepted a role as a silent provider, under Serafina's strict conditions. Do you think his plan to stay in a hotel in Boston is a sign of respect or a strategy to avoid confrontation? If this story of love and sacrifice moved you, please like and share. Let us know your rating, 10, in the comments below.